welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true and disturbing stories about Appalachian road trips. These are the kinds of stories that remind us why some roads are better left untraveled. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. I was 27 when things started to go sideways on a solo road trip through the Appalachians. I'd just gotten out of the military that summer, honorable discharge, nothing dramatic. I figured a few weeks of driving and camping might help clear my head before I had to start thinking about what came next. No deadlines, no schedule, no pressure. Just me, my dog Roscoe, and a Subaru that had seen better days but hadn't let me down yet. I took the long way through the Blue Ridge Mountains. By mid-September, I was deep into it, winding along back roads that curved between thick trees and opened into rolling views that didn't look real. I wasn't aiming for tourist spots. If a road had more grass than asphalt and the trees hung low over it, I usually followed it. I had a few campsites picked out and a couple of cheap cabins booked through a rental site, mostly for showers and decent sleep. But one of those cabins caught my eye for different reasons. It was listed as pet-friendly, remote, and quiet. No neighbors, no streetlights, just a one-room wooden place tucked off a loop road with a stream nearby and trees so thick you couldn't see anything but green from the porch. The photos looked peaceful in a way that didn't seem posed. A little overgrown, a little forgotten. That's what I liked about it. The host sent me the lockbox code a few days before I arrived, said they'd be out of cell range during my stay, but the place would be ready and unlocked. That was fine. I preferred the idea of being left alone. The GPS cut out maybe 20 minutes from the place. Not surprising, half those roads barely registered on the map. I pulled up the saved directions and followed them the old school way, but something felt off. I passed a couple of turnoffs that weren't on the map, and some road markers were so faded they looked like chalk on stone. Even with the windows down, everything felt too still. Eventually, I came across a small gate that matched the description. No number. Just a rusted latch with a chain draped through it. It wasn't locked. I opened it and pulled through, gravel crunching under the tires. The cabin looked different, not ruined, not unsafe, just wrong. The clearing in the pictures had been spacious and sunlit. This one was tight, more like someone had hacked out just enough space to park. Saplings and brush pressed up against the cabin walls. The trees loomed close, like they'd taken the place back. It looked like it hadn't seen much traffic in a long time. Still, the lockbox was there. The code worked. The door creaked open into a single room with a twin bed, a stovetop, a small table, and a lantern on a hook. No cell signal, no mirrors. There was a door at the back of the kitchen wall, painted the same dull color as the rest of the cabin. At first, I didn't notice it, but when I got closer, I saw the bolt, heavy, iron, rusted around the screws like it had been there forever. It didn't match anything else. I didn't touch it. That night was quiet. Roscoe curled up next to the bed, and I sat reading until the lantern dimmed. The air inside the cabin was dry and cool. It was the first time in days I didn't feel like I had to keep one eye open. No traffic sounds, no other people. It felt like being tucked inside a pocket of nowhere, which is exactly what I thought I wanted. The knock came the next morning. 2 knocks, sharp and fast. I opened the door right away, expecting to see someone. Maybe a hunter, maybe the host. Nobody was there. The clearing was still, no footprints in the dirt. The chain on the gate hadn't moved. I stepped off the porch, walked around the side of the cabin, checked behind the trees. Nothing. I didn't say anything out loud, but I felt something settle into my chest like a stone. Not panic, just a heavy awareness that something didn't fit. I walked a little further out, then back. Then I sat on the porch, pretending I wasn't waiting for something else to happen. It didn't. Not that day. That afternoon, I took the trail behind the ridge. It was narrow and overgrown, barely more than a game trail, but I needed to move. About a mile up, I ran into someone. A man in his 50s. Tall, narrow, wearing a sun-faded camo jacket and carrying a rifle across his back like it weighed nothing. His face didn't give much away, but his eyes stuck with me, hollow, like he'd been looking too long at things you're not supposed to see. "You up at the Ellis place?" he asked. I said yeah, though I had no idea what that meant. He stared at me for a beat. "Keep your dog close at night." And then he walked past, feet silent in the underbrush. That night, I couldn't sleep. Roscoe stayed on alert too, ears flicking at sounds I couldn't hear. It wasn't noisy. It was the opposite. Not even the usual creaks and groans of an old structure settling, just a dense, heavy stillness. Then came the sound. Not scratching, not mice, just one dragging noise from behind the bolted door, like someone pulling something soft fabric or a tarp across a wooden floor. It wasn't rhythmic. It didn't repeat. It just moved. Roscoe stood up and faced the door. Her ears went flat. She didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared, waiting for the noise to come again. I stayed on the floor, hatchet across my lap, staring at that bolt like I could will it to hold. I didn't sleep. I waited for sunrise. When the light finally came, I grabbed my bag, threw everything in the car, and got the hell out of there. I didn't stop to eat. I drove straight to a gas station 2 towns over and paid cash for a motel with yellowed sheets and flickering lights. It was still better. 3 days later, I got a call. Blocked number. I picked up without thinking. Male voice on the other end, too casual. "Hey," he said, "you left your camera here." I paused. "I don't own a camera. It's a Nikon," he said, like that would clear it up. "With lenses. Black bag. Looks expensive." "Not mine," I told him. He hesitated. "There's a sleeping bag, too. Blue. North Face." Small tear near the foot. My stomach dropped. "Mine's in my car. I used it last night." "Backpack?" he asked, almost gently. "Couple of things inside. You sure you didn't leave a key for someone else?" "No," I said. "Nobody knew where I was." Silence. "Well," he said, voice flat, "someone's been staying here." Then he hung up. I tried to call back, but the number was blocked. Gone. That night, I messaged the rental host asking if anything else had been found. A few minutes later, I got a reply, "Everything has been cleared." I stared at the screen. Then I typed, "I want to know what happened. Please respond." The answer came quick, keys accounted for, no further issues. That was the last I heard. A week later, I got my deposit refunded, full amount, no explanation, just dropped into my account like a quiet bribe. That's when I told my mom the full story. She listened all the way through, didn't interrupt. Then, a few hours later, she called me back. "If the host told you they'd be out of range," she said, "how did they know what was found?" I didn't have an answer. I checked the rental site again. The listing was gone. Not paused, not inactive. Deleted, erased. The message thread was still there, but the property link led nowhere. Dead page. My cousin Drew had just graduated high school, and his parents, maybe out of generosity or maybe just relief that he made it through, lent him their SUV for one last taste of freedom before college swallowed him whole. He pitched it as a solo trip, some time to find himself, whatever that meant. But I knew him better than that. He didn't like being alone for more than 5 minutes. So I nudged my way in with promises of playlists, snacks, and splitting the driving. We didn't have a real plan, just a loose idea to head for the Appalachian Mountains, camp a few nights, maybe hike a bit, maybe not, just drift. Our only actual goal was a spot Drew had heard about near the Tennessee border, some hidden, gorgeous campsite supposedly only locals knew about. He said a guy from his summer job told him about it. That was enough for us. He punched the coordinates into the GPS, and we were off. The beginning was fine winding roads, gas station stops, bad fast food. We passed through little towns that looked like they hadn't changed in 40 years. Every diner had the same red vinyl booths. Every general store had a hand-painted sign. Every gas pump clicked too early and made you try again. It was comforting, in a way. But somewhere past a town called Bellhurst, we missed the exit. The turn came out of nowhere, a sudden green blur behind a curtain of trees. Drew flinched as it disappeared in the rear view. "That was it," he said, sighing. "Can you loop back?" He shook his head. "Nah, looks like it's rerouting us. Says this way saves us a few minutes anyway. Shortcut, right." At first, it just seemed like a typical back road. But after a few miles, the pavement thinned out. The trees got closer, really close, like they were trying to meet overhead. The shoulder disappeared completely. We didn't see another car for a while. I watched the power lines vanish from above us, erased one by one. I looked at my phone. 1 bar. Then none. That's when I saw the first thing that made my stomach tighten. On the right side of the road, mostly buried in weeds, was a metal sign. Faded blue. Looked like it had been stuck there by hand, not planted officially. No post. Just jammed into the earth at an angle, barely 2 feet tall. It just said, "School." No arrow, no road name, no other markings, just that one word. "Did you see that?" I asked, pointing behind us. Drew didn't even glance back. He was fiddling with the aux cable. See what? There was a sign. It just said, "School." That's all. He laughed. Creepy little mountain kids gotta learn somewhere. I leaned back, watching the trees blur together. The sun had dropped lower, casting everything in that too warm gold that makes shadows look longer than they should. The road curved sharply. Then again, the GPS blinked out a minute later. The screen went gray. No map, no road, just a dot floating in a blank space. We should have turned around, but we didn't. Maybe we were too stubborn, or maybe it was just that teenage confidence, that belief nothing truly bad can happen as long as you're together and have a full tank of gas. About an hour later, I turned around to grab my hoodie and a bag of chips from the back seat. Gone. Not shoved under a seat, gone. Just not there. I stared. Hey, where's my hoodie? Drew glanced in the rear view. Didn't you toss it in the trunk earlier? No. I left it right there, on the middle seat. Chips were next to it. He frowned, pulling over slowly. Weird. We got out and checked everything. Trunk, bags, under the seats, nothing. It was like they'd never existed. I could still picture the sleeves flopped over the side. You sure you didn't move it at the last stop? I gave him a look. He sighed and checked the footwell again for the third time. I could tell it was bothering him too, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. Instead, we got back in the car and kept going. That's when I saw the time. The car clock said 4:23. The last time I'd looked right before we passed that sign, it had said 3:50. It hadn't felt like 30 minutes. 15, max. Maybe 10. I didn't say anything, just watched the woods roll past. By dusk, we still hadn't seen a single town. No stores, no gas stations, not even a mailbox. We finally pulled into an open stretch by a shallow creek, just enough room to park and pitch the tent. We got out, stretched, walked around. There were no sounds, no birds, no bugs, no breeze in the trees, just a thick, pressing silence that made your ears ring. I rubbed the back of my neck and felt damp, though it wasn't hot. It just felt wrong, like we were in the wrong place, even if we didn't know where right was. Later, I opened the cooler to grab a soda. My hand brushed something solid, not cold. I pulled it out, a steel-toed work boot, old, mud-caked, big size 11 or 12 maybe. I stared at it, trying to process. Drew? He turned from the tent. I held up the boot. Is this some joke? Nope, he said quickly, too quickly. That's not ours. We stood there for a second. Then we grabbed the flashlights. We searched the area, every direction. Checked behind trees, scanned the brush, even looked for tire tracks. Nothing. The ground was dry, untouched. Cooler still had the ice packs on top. Everything else says we'd packed it. We slept with the flashlights between us that night. Or at least we tried. By morning, the boot was gone, cooler untouched, ice unmelted, just gone. We didn't talk much, just got in the car and tried to leave. But no matter which direction we took, we ended up back on the same road. Same collapsed guardrail bent into a ditch. Same mile marker with the numbers scratched off. Same fallen tree on the side. After the third loop, I finally said, "We're stuck." "And what?" Drew asked, trying to sound casual. He failed. "I don't know. A loop. Something's wrong." He laughed, but it sounded forced, almost like he was choking it back. I took the wheel. This time, I stopped turning. Every fork in the road I ignored. If the path curved, I forced the SUV straight, even if it meant bumping the edge or scraping gravel. My hands ached from gripping the wheel too tight. Eventually, something shifted. The trees spaced out. The light changed. Not brighter, just different, like the color balance had been altered. The air felt lighter, easier to breathe. We came out onto a gravel shoulder. Up ahead was a building. It looked like a diner, but barely. Roof sagging. Windows covered in brown paper. Weeds climbing to the sills. A cracked sign swinging above the door. Darla's. We stopped. For the first time in hours, I let out a full breath. Didn't even realize I'd been holding it. We got out. The place felt off, but less so. Like whatever had been choking us in the woods didn't reach here. I walked to the passenger side, opened the door. And there it was, my hoodie, folded neatly on the seat. On top of it, the bag of chips, still sealed. I stared, then at Drew. "Did you find these?" He shook his head, face pale. He didn't say anything, just walked to the trunk and opened it. The boots were back, both this time, placed side by side between the cooler and tent bag. Clean, wiped down. Names scratched into the soles, one on each boot. Neither name was ours. We didn't talk, Didn't go near the diner. We just got back in the car and drove. Hours later, we rolled into a gas station in the town called Morven. The cashier, a woman with a thick accent and bleach blonde hair, looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Y'all come in off the quarry road?" Drew nodded, too tired to ask. She raised her eyebrows. "Ain't been passable in years." Neither of us responded. A week after I got home, I unpacked and found something I definitely didn't pack. A child's notebook. Spiral-bound, cardboard cover, only one page written on, thick black crayon, "Stay on the main road." I tossed it in the trash. That night I was driving alone through the Appalachian back roads, trying to make up for the fact that I'd left hours later than I planned. I told myself I could still make it in decent time if I skipped dinner and pushed through. But once I left the highway and dropped into those narrow, coiling roads, I realized how long the night was really going to feel. The route twisted through the mountains in long, curling stretches that felt more like trails than roads. I remember thinking how the trees seemed to lean in closer than usual. Just slightly, but enough to make me feel like I was being funneled somewhere, not simply driving through. They weren't towering or dramatic, just thick and close. It gave the whole place a strange sense of pressure. No stars, no moonlight. Only two thin beams from my headlights, with darkness swallowing everything else. My phone had dropped signal maybe 20 minutes earlier. At first, I didn't even notice. I was listening to music, following the GPS. Then the music cut out mid-song. I looked over and saw the frozen map, the spinning wheel, and that dreaded "no service" at the top of the screen. I wasn't surprised this wasn't a signal-friendly part of the state, but that didn't make it less unnerving. Still, I wasn't worried. I figured I'd just stay on the main road and keep heading west. I knew the general direction, and I'd taken this road before. Not often, but enough to feel confident. I kept telling myself it was fine, just a quiet road on a late night, nothing more. That worked for a while. But not long after I passed what should have been the halfway point, I started noticing things that didn't fit. First was a rusted metal sign at the edge of a sharp curve. I slowed down just to read it. It pointed toward a place called Dowick, though most of the letters were flaking off or smeared with rust. The whole thing looked like it had been sitting there for decades. The odd part was, I was almost certain it hadn't been there the last time I drove this road. It wasn't just that I didn't remember it. It felt out of place, like someone had dragged it out of a junkyard and stuck it there. A little further on, maybe 15 minutes later, I saw a gas station ahead. This one I recognized, or thought I did. I remembered passing it on past trips. It had always been abandoned. Boards over the windows, graffiti on the pump housings, old plastic signs hanging crooked. That brittle, sun-bleached look that only forgotten places have. Except this time, the lights were on. I spotted them first from a distance. Fluorescents under the canopy flickered to life, buzzing that low electrical hum you only notice when everything else is silent. Then the interior lights blinked on, flooding the front of the store in pale, hazy glow. The lot looked freshly swept, like someone had just cleaned up. But there wasn't a single car. I slowed down. Maybe I thought about pulling in just to check, maybe use the bathroom or grab a drink, but something about it felt staged, like it was pretending to be open rather than truly being open. I kept driving, and that's when I started to feel it, the wrongness. At first it was subtle, a growing sense that the road wasn't doing what it should. Curves lasted longer, hills rose higher or didn't dip back down where they should have. Places I knew I should have passed by now never came. My eyes kept flicking to the clock on the dash, trying to make sense of how long I'd been on this stretch. I couldn't tell if I was looping back somehow or if something else was happening. That was when I noticed the headlights. They appeared in the mirror, distant at first. Just a faint white glow over the rise. It didn't seem strange. Another car on a back road at night wasn't unusual. But it was late, and I hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. It caught my attention. I kept checking the rear view. The lights didn't change. They didn't get closer. They didn't drop back. They just stayed where they were. Eventually, I could make out the vehicle. An old sedan. Big, boxy frame. Something vintage, maybe late 70s. But the way it moved was strange. Every bend I took, it matched perfectly. Every rise and fall, it stayed in position. No drifting. No small corrections. It followed too precisely. At first I brushed it off. Maybe it was just someone heading the same way, but the longer it stayed, the more it felt like it wasn't just driving. It was tracking. I started to get jittery. There was no real place to pull off. No shoulder, no exits, just trees and road. But 10 minutes later, I saw a gravel turnout. I decided to stop and pretend to check my phone, just to see what the other driver would do. I slowed, flicked the blinker, and rolled into the gravel. The tires crunched loud in the silence. The sedan glided past without slowing. It crept forward like it was moving through molasses. I couldn't see the driver. The headlights were too bright, the glass just a blank silhouette. I waited until the lights disappeared around the bend. Waited longer than I needed to, just listening to the tick of the cooling engine, trying not to let my thoughts spiral. Then I pulled back onto the road. 2 turns later, the same headlights appeared again. Closer this time. I didn't think. I floored it. The tire screamed against the curves. The suspension groaned as I pushed faster than I should. But the sedan stayed right there. Its headlights flooded the rear window, bleaching the interior in stark white. Every shadow vanished. All I could see was glare. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I spotted a dirt lane veering left and yanked the wheel. The car skidded, gravel spraying, branches clawed at the side panels, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the headlights were gone. I didn't slow down. The lane narrowed fast, winding deeper into the trees. I wasn't even sure if it was a real road anymore, just packed dirt and overgrowth. I searched for a place to turn around. That's when my headlights lit up a tree ahead. A sign was nailed to the trunk, crooked like someone hadn't cared if it hung straight. It had my last name on it, painted in thick, black strokes. Not a common name. And spelled exactly right. I slammed the brakes. My hands shook on the wheel. I stared at the sign, praying I'd misread it, that it was coincidence. But I hadn't. I threw the car into reverse and tore back down the path, gravel flying. I hit the main road at full speed and didn't stop, but something was wrong. The pavement looked different. Cracks ran down the center, weeds sprouted through, like it hadn't been touched in years. The air smelled musty and sharp, like mold and ozone. The painted line was almost gone, just fragments of white clinging to the surface. Then I saw it. A mailbox at the roadside, old, rusted, and painted on the side in peeling red letters was my first name. I didn't even blink. I floored it. I didn't stop, didn't let up, didn't check the mirror. I just drove until the sky began to lighten. The faint gray at the horizon told me morning was coming. And then, just like that, the world snapped back. The road smoothed out. The cracks vanished. Signs reappeared. Normal ones, with towns I recognized. A truck passed going the other direction, and I almost laughed. I pulled into a big, open truck stop off the interstate. Bright lights, cars, people, life. I parked. My hands still clenched the wheel so hard they hurt. I didn't get out right away. I just sat there, letting the car idle, breathing, trying to convince myself I was back in the real world. That morning I turned around and drove home. I didn't finish the trip. I didn't tell anyone. Marcus, one of those guys who always thinks he knows a better way, swore he had a shortcut through the Appalachians. Some obscure string of back roads supposedly known only to locals and legends that would shave almost an hour off our trip to his cousin's cabin near Lake Raymore. He said he'd driven them before, claimed they were scenic as hell, and that we'd thank him once we were halfway through a six-pack on the porch while the rest of the world was still stuck on I-27. It didn't sound unreasonable at the time. I like mountains, and I've always found night driving peaceful. Less traffic, fewer distractions, nothing but the road and the occasional deer. I didn't argue. I should have argued. We veered off the main route sometime after 9. The road wasn't marked by a sign, just a cracked old turnoff between 2 leaning pine trees and a rusted mailbox that probably belonged to a house long gone. I glanced at the map on my phone before the signal dipped. 1 bar, then gone. The screen grayed out. The GPS kept spinning like it was trying to catch its breath. Marcus shrugged. It's normal out here. Give it a minute. But the deeper we drove, the quieter everything became. Not just peaceful and rural. It was a silence that settled into your ears, made you hyper-aware of every click of the turn signal, every creak of the car's suspension. I cracked the window at one point just to hear something. Anything. Even outside, there was nothing. No wind, no insects, no rustling leaves. Just silence, thick and complete. The road climbed fast, winding tighter the farther we went. At first, it was manageable. Sharp turns, the usual blind corners, but soon the curves folded into themselves, overlapping so tightly that I had to slow to a crawl just to stay on the road. my hands locked on the wheel. Trees loomed taller, leaning in like the forest didn't want us passing through. We passed a few houses here and there, tiny, weather-beaten mountain homes with warped steps and sun-bleached lawn chairs. One had a porch light flickering. Another had laundry pins stiff to a wire, though no one was outside. Normal, if not a little eerie. But by the fourth or fifth one, things turned. Marcus leaned forward, peering through the windshield. "Hold up," he muttered. "You noticed that?" I slowed. The porch sane busted railing. He was right. It looked like the same house we'd passed 2 turns ago. Same peeling paint on the door frame. Same rocking chair tipped to the side. Curtains drawn shut in the same window. Then, around the next bend, it was there again. The same house. No variation. I tried to explain it to myself. Maybe they were built from a template. Maybe the same contractor worked this stretch of road and ran out of ideas. Then we passed it again. And again. It was like driving through a loop on a broken reel of film. The same image, burned into the side of the mountain. The GPS had frozen solid. The little arrow stuck in place like it had given up on pretending we were moving. "Try restarting it?" Marcus suggested. I did, of course. Killed the app. Opened it again. No signal. Nothing loaded. No blue dot. Just a gray screen and my reflection staring back. We didn't talk much after that. It was the kind of silence that feels like it might break something if you push too hard. We drove. We watched the road. We waited for it to change. When the gas station appeared on the left, glowing like an oasis, it felt almost too good to be true. A dull neon sign buzzed above the pumps, throwing a shaky red glow across the pavement. The lights inside were on. Shelves looked stocked. A little coffee station sat in the back corner. It looked normal, functional, like a place that had no idea the world outside was bending in on itself. I pulled in fast. The gravel crunched under the tires, the first real sound we'd heard in hours. The front door creaked when we stepped inside. No bell, just stillness. The air was stale, but not foul, dusty, old, like the place hadn't seen a customer in years but stayed ready anyway. No one stood behind the counter. Marcus called out, "Hello?" His voice bounced off the aisles like it wanted to escape. No reply. He wandered to the fridge, opened the door, and pulled out a soda. Looked at the label. Stopped moving. "Dude," he said, bringing it over. "Look at this." The expiration date was clear. August 24th, 2005. Exactly 20 years ago. I checked other items. Chips. Candy. A sandwich in plastic wrap. All the same date. We didn't take anything. Just backed out slowly, like we didn't want to wake something up. And that's when I saw him. Across the road, on the porch of one of those identical houses, stood a man, hands at his sides, just standing, watching. He didn't move, didn't wave. His outline looked wrong, too sharp, like he didn't belong in the same dimension. His clothes were faded in that flat way you see in old photographs, but his face was clear, and he was looking straight at us. I got in the car and turned the key. As soon as the engine started, the man moved. Not slowly, not naturally. One smooth, mechanical turn, like a statue rotating on a motor. He pivoted cleanly, walked into the house, and slammed the door. The sound was sharp, loud. The kind of slam that stays in your head long after the echo fades. We got out of there without another word. Back on the road, things felt different. Not better, just heavier, more wrong. We passed another bend. Marcus pointed, his voice tight. "That's the same mile marker." I looked. Same bend in the guardrail, same graffiti tag and faded red spray paint. We'd seen it before. Then we saw it again. I stopped counting after the third time. It was clear we weren't driving in circles. We were stuck inside something. The sky darkened, thicker somehow. And that's when the headlights appeared in my rear view. At first, I felt relief. Another driver. We weren't alone, but they never got closer, never passed, just stayed behind us. Exactly the same distance, no matter how I adjusted speed. I pulled onto the gravel, hoping they'd go around. They didn't. They pulled over too, 30 feet back, headlights glaring. No one got out. No movement at all. Every nerve in my body tightened. I hit the gas. The car screamed forward. The other car followed. Every turn, every curve, every hill. It stayed behind us, perfectly synced. Then the gas station showed up again. Same flickering sign, same humming neon, same empty pumps. The car behind us pulled in too, rolled up beside the pumps, stopped. Then its headlights cut out. No cabin light, no silhouette, nothing. We didn't stop to figure it out. I yanked the wheel and turned hard onto a dirt road that looked like an afterthought, a slash through the trees. The tires skidded over rocks. Branches scraped the car, but no headlights followed. No sound behind us at all. We didn't know where the road led. It could have ended in a ravine, but we kept going. There was no turning back. The path stretched on, rougher every minute. At one point, I thought we'd lost a tire, the jolt so brutal it shook the frame. But we kept moving. Then, suddenly pavement. A clean strip of asphalt under our tires. Headlights, dozens of them. Cars zipping by in both directions. We'd hit the highway. The real highway. Everything felt real again. My best friend Marissa had this thing about scenic routes. It didn't matter where we were going. If there was a longer, more winding way to get there, she wanted to take it. She'd say that back roads made the world feel bigger. Like we were exploring something, instead of just going somewhere. Personally, I thought that was a little dramatic, but I went along with it more times than I could count. And to be fair, some of those drives were beautiful. Long stretches of forest, little rivers you'd never see from a highway, all of that. That night, we were driving down from eastern Kentucky to visit a friend at a college near Chattanooga. If we stayed on the interstate, it was a 5-hour trip. But Marissa had printed MapQuest directions that promised a shortcut through the hills. It cuts off like 40 minutes, she said, flipping the pages like they were winning lottery numbers. I raised an eyebrow, but I didn't argue. I'd learned it wasn't worth it. Besides, I liked night driving. Something about it was soothing. The road was quiet, the air cooler, the world stripped down to just headlights and the hum of the tires. Worst case, I figured we'd lose some time and end up with a funny story to tell. For the first couple of hours, it was exactly what I expected. The road was narrow and curvy, 2 lanes with a faded yellow line and barely any shoulder. Trees pressed close on both sides, growing wild and heavy. We saw the occasional mailbox or fence post, maybe a porch light flickering through the trees. The hills rolled on, the road dipping and rising like a slow roller coaster. It felt remote, but not threatening, just quiet. Then the gas stations stopped showing up, then the houses, then the streetlights. The further we went, the more it felt like we'd slipped out of something. Like we'd passed an invisible boundary without noticing. Even the radio gave out. Static, then a low hum, then nothing. Silence. I checked my phone. No bars, just the words, no service, glaring back at me. Marissa didn't care. She held up her MapQuest papers like a prize. See, analog never fails, she joked. I forced a laugh, but I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. Something felt off. The road looked the same. We hadn't turned once. But then I noticed. The yellow line was gone. Not faded. Not worn down. Gone. The asphalt changed too. It turned rough, grainy, the kind of road you'd expect by a barn, not cutting through a state. Patches of cracked blacktop, dust where the pavement had worn away. Then we saw the sign. A splintered, weather-stained plank nailed to a leaning post. The letters were nearly gone, eaten away by time. I could just make out the name. Something like Carvin's Hollow or Darvin's Hill. Not a name I'd ever heard, and I've lived in Kentucky my whole life. Marissa shifted in her seat but didn't say a word. I think that was when we both started to feel uneasy. A few minutes later, we passed the shack. It looked 100 years old, leaning into itself like it was too tired to stand. The porch had caved in at the middle. The roof sagged low like a bad hat. Out front was an old Coke machine half buried in dirt, the kind with mechanical buttons and a cracked glass front. I hadn't seen one since I was a kid. The windows were boarded up with dry gray wood, soft at the edges. Weeds choked the steps. We didn't slow down. We just drove past in silence. 10 minutes later, we passed it again. At first, I thought it was a second shack, some weird twin. I even tried a joke. Guess they like symmetry out here, I said. Marissa didn't laugh. She didn't even look at me. Her face had gone still, like she was listening to something inside her own head. 20 minutes later, it appeared again. Same shack, same Coke machine, same weeds. This time I slowed the car. My hands were slick on the wheel. "We've looped back," I said. "We must have taken a wrong turn." Marissa shook her head. "We haven't turned once. We've been going straight." I told her to mark the next intersection. She pulled a napkin from the glove box and drew an X on it with a pen. A minute later, we passed a gravel road. I pointed at it. "That's our marker." We drove on, and then the shack appeared again. Same place, same everything. Marissa held up the napkin. Blank, no ink. like nothing had ever been written on it. I pulled over hard. Dust kicked up as we skidded to the shoulder. "Stay here," I said, already out of the car. She yelled something, but I didn't hear. I was already heading for the shack. I needed to see it, to prove to myself it was real. The Coke machine was rusted through. The buttons were warped, soft like melted rubber. I reached for the handle. That's when the porch light clicked on. A dim yellow glow spilled across the steps and touched the toes of my shoes. It hadn't been on before. I froze. That light felt deliberate, not automatic, not motion sensor, deliberate. I turned and ran. I made it back to the car in seconds. Before I could slam the door, the lock snapped down. Click, 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 all 4 doors. Then the headlights blinked, once, twice, then stayed on. Marissa was crying quietly. Her hands covered her mouth. "Don't stop again," she whispered. "Please, just drive." So I drove. I pushed the car harder than I ever had. 60, 70, maybe more. But it didn't matter. The shack didn't return, and neither did anything else. No towns, no signs, just endless, dark road. And then the clock froze. 1:15. It didn't matter how far we went. Didn't matter how long we drove. The dashboard still glowed with the same numbers. 1:15. Over and over. My phone was dead. Wouldn't restart. Marissa's screen was frozen too. Lit up, but unresponsive. Like time itself had stopped. Then, finally, we saw them. 2 faint red taillights up ahead. A car. I almost screamed. We followed it without hesitation. I stayed right behind it like our lives depended on it. Maybe they did. The road dipped and twisted suddenly. I barely kept control. Then the pavement smoothed out. Highway. Wide. Painted. Lit. The good kind. The clock jumped forward. 3:07. I looked up. The taillights were gone. No exits. No driveways. Just gone. I didn't say a word for the rest of the drive. Neither did Marissa. I was 25 when it happened. The whole idea was just to get away for a bit. Nothing dramatic, just some quiet. I'd been feeling stretched thin, and the thought of disappearing into the woods for a week sounded like exactly what I needed. That kind of silence you only find in the back corners of the Appalachians. The kind where your phone goes dead and even the air feels hushed, like everything is just paused. I had a few friends who planned to meet me later on at the campground in Larch Ridge, but for the first stretch it was just me and Rylan. He and I had done a few road trips together before. Always easygoing, always down to detour if something looked interesting. Reliable, which is exactly what you want when you're driving into the middle of nowhere with no real schedule. We packed up my car with the usual stuff. A cooler full of drinks and random snacks, sleeping bags, the tent strapped to the roof, a Bluetooth speaker that barely held a charge. Our only real plan was to follow the winding state roads until we got close to the park, then cut up into the trails from there. The first couple of days were perfect. Blue skies, decent road music, and the kind of small towns you always forget exist until you drive through them. Little clusters of old brick storefronts with crooked signs, gas stations that still used flip number displays. Everyone waved when you passed. It felt like a warm-up lap for the real quiet I was chasing. Then, on day 3, I remembered something a guy I used to work with had told me. He mentioned an old back road called Barrel Hollow. It cut through Montfort Woods and dropped you right near the park entrance. According to him, it shaved off a good 30 or 40 minutes. He said it wasn't exactly scenic, but it was a local shortcut. So when we saw the narrow turn-off, no sign, just a break in the trees and a cracked road pointing into the woods, I figured, why not? GPS still showed us on a viable route, just a gray line on the screen. No name, no nearby towns, but technically still a road. The moment we turned, everything felt different. Not scary, just strange. The lines were barely visible. Some had faded completely, and the pavement was more cracked than asphalt. Potholes everywhere. Weird patches where someone had tried to repair them with cement but only made things worse. The trees pressed in quickly, really close. I had to slow down just to make sure we didn't scrape the sides of the car on stray branches. We figured it would open up again after a while. It didn't. About 20 minutes in, the turn started. Not gentle curves, sharp, sudden bends that forced me to brake hard and grip the wheel like we were on a mountain pass. And they just kept coming. Every time I thought the road would straighten out, there was another one. And another. By the 40-minute mark, Rylan had stopped talking. He was watching the gas gauge more than the scenery. We weren't low, but still, it wasn't going up. Then came the first house. It showed up out of nowhere. We turned a bend, and there it was. White, 2 stories, porch sagging like a tired breath, vines crawling up the walls, no address, no car in the drive, just sitting there, quiet like it had been forgotten long ago. The windows were pitch black. Not dark, black. I slowed down, tapped the horn, just in case. Nothing moved. We didn't say anything, just passed it. 10 minutes later, there was another one. Same shape, same leaning porch, same black windows. At first, I assumed it was just a similar style, some old rural neighborhood where houses were built from the same blueprint. But then we passed a third, and then a fourth. They weren't just similar, they were identical. Same missing slats on the porch rail, same sag in the roof line, same angle of ivy across the upper left window. And then the fifth one was different. One of the upstairs windows glowed, a soft, dull yellow light, flickering like the bulb was struggling. The rest of the house looked the same, broken porch boards, peeling paint, but that light changed everything. I stopped, rolled the window down, called out, just in case someone was inside. Maybe these weren't abandoned. No response. But I could hear the faint buzz of the bulb from where we sat. Ryland didn't like that. He gripped my arm and said, low and flat, drive. So I did. But 10 minutes later, the same house appeared again. Same bend, same glowing upstairs window. That's when I knew something was wrong. I pulled over and checked the GPS. The signal was still there, but the little arrow showing our position had started spinning, not drifting, spinning. Like the phone couldn't figure out which way we were facing. The road still showed, but no names, no markers, no signs. And then the gas light popped on. We kept going anyway, slowly now. Ryland kept glancing out the back window, and I couldn't tell if he was watching for the house or hoping something would follow us. The trees pressed in tighter, branches brushed the roof. It was like the woods were narrowing by the minute. Then the headlights caught something. An old road sign, green, blank, covered in rust and weeds. But I could see the bolt marks where letters used to be, same pattern I'd seen earlier, same scratches. I think we passed that exact sign an hour before. Ryland said we had to turn around. I told him it wouldn't matter. If the road looped back on itself, we'd just keep finding the same things. He went quiet again, not scared, just heavy, like something had finally clicked. Eventually, the road got so tight I had to fold the mirrors in. The asphalt buckled. Little ridges ran beneath the tires like old fault lines. Then the dashboard flickered. The radio cut out. The engine coughed once, then again, and then nothing. We coasted to a stop, right in front of another house. This one was closer. The porch steps were half buried in leaves. The front door hung open, just open, and from inside, I heard it. A slow, dragging creak, something moving upstairs. Not walking, dragging, heavy, measured. Ryland didn't move, didn't even blink. He just stared at the house and said we should stay in the car. I thought about it, I really did. But the air pouring out of that open door felt colder than the night itself. Not just chilly wrong, like it didn't belong. I told him we had to walk. He refused, until the creaking changed. Got sharper, faster, like whatever was inside was heading for the stairs. That's when he cracked. He opened the passenger door and bolted. I followed. We stayed on the road. No talking, just moving. And then, behind us, I heard it again. The creak, louder now, rhythmic. Like something wooden was being dragged. I turned once, no house, no door, nothing, but the sound didn't stop. Then we passed the same blank road sign, same missing letters, only now the grass around it was pressed flat, crushed, like something massive had passed through. I don't remember how long we walked. Time got strange. It felt like we were moving through the same stretch over and over. My legs ached, my throat burned, and then, finally, headlights, a pickup truck, old and dusty. It slowed to a crawl beside us. The driver leaned out, middle-aged, beard, denim jacket, real small-town energy. He asked if we needed help. I told him we were trying to get to Clearwater. He frowned, said we passed it hours ago, that we'd been walking away from it the whole time. I turned back, nothing behind us, just the road. No signposts, no houses, no sounds. We climbed into his truck without saying a word. Neither of us looked back. And I've never taken Barrel Hollow again. I was 19 when it happened. Back then, I honestly believed I understood fear. I thought I had already lived through the worst of it. High school fights, bad breakups, a couple of reckless nights that should have ended worse than they did. I thought being scared meant adrenaline and noise, something you could see coming. But this was different. This was the kind of fear that creeps in slowly, like a leak in your roof you don't notice until the whole ceiling sags. My best friend Darren had just bought a beat-up old Ford pickup. It had once been fire engine red, but now it was mostly rust and sun-bleached paint. The engine rattled when you started it, and the passenger door only opened if you lifted the handle and yanked it sideways, like you were trying to break in. I made fun of him for it, of course, but he was proud. It was his first real adult thing, and he wanted to celebrate the way only 19-year-olds do, by doing something mildly irresponsible. His plan was simple: a road trip. No destination, no GPS, just a stack of old maps, gas station snacks, and a general idea that we'd drive through the Appalachians using only the back roads. No highways, no cities. The highways for people trying to get somewhere, he said. The mountains are for people trying to feel something. At the time, I thought that was profound. Now it just feels like the last thing you say before something goes wrong. We left on a Thursday morning. The weather was fine, skies were clear. For the first few hours, it was exactly what we had hoped for. Quiet roads. Trees so thick on either side it felt like we were tunneling through a green blur. Every once in a while, we'd pass an abandoned shack or an old billboard half swallowed by ivy. It felt like freedom. No responsibilities, no noise, just two guys, a truck, and whatever was around the next bend. At some point in the early afternoon, we stopped at a gas station that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1960s. There was one working pump and a tiny convenience store, the kind where the candy rack doubled as the checkout counter. The clerk was an older guy, hunched over a newspaper, not even pretending to care we were there. Darren grabbed chips and jerky. I grabbed a soda and a stale muffin. As we were walking out, the man muttered something. Quiet, but clear enough. Don't take the wrong turn. We laughed it off the way you do when something doesn't sit right, but you're too proud to admit it. Back in the truck, Darren said, "Well, that wasn't ominous at all." I joked that maybe he was just trying to scare tourists. But the truth is, it stuck with me. I kept hearing those words in my head over and over. Not shouted, not threatening, just tired. An hour later, we realized we should have reached the town Darren had marked on the map. We hadn't. In fact, we hadn't seen any other cars or road signs for a while. Just trees, curves, and the occasional mailbox with no house in sight. Darren kept saying we were close, that we just had to keep going. But I could tell he was guessing. He kept fiddling with the map like it might rearrange itself and give him a better answer. Then we passed the barn. It was off to the right, maybe 30 feet back from the road. Old, weathered, half its roof caved in. The grass around it was so overgrown it looked like no one had been near it in years. We both noticed it. Darren even pointed it out. We drove on. 10 minutes later, there it was again. Same barn, same collapsed roof. Same crooked mailbox out front. We hadn't turned around. We hadn't looped. But there it was. Darren slowed down. I told him maybe there were just two barns that looked alike, but deep down I didn't believe it. And when we passed it a third time, we stopped pretending. He pulled over. We got out, stretched, checked the map again. The truck's clock read 6 o'clock. My phone said 4:30. Darren's said 5. We compared them, stood there frowning at our screens, waiting for one to correct itself. None of them did. Eventually, we shrugged it off and got back in the truck. Not because we weren't worried, but because neither of us wanted to say what we were both thinking. Then Darren turned the key, and the radio came on by itself. It wasn't music, just static, loud and crackling, and behind it a voice. Raspy, strained, like someone trying to speak through a bad connection. Only 3 words: turn around. He shut the radio off so fast his hand slipped and hit the dash. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. We just sat there, the engine humming quietly, like we were waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. So we drove on. But the road was different now. The yellow lines in the middle started to fade bit by bit until they were gone completely. In their place, faint white marks started to show up. Not straight. Not even. Like someone had dragged chalk down the road in long, jittery streaks. We passed another sign, bent almost in half, completely blank except for 3 long gashes carved across the metal. We didn't talk much after that. Darren kept his eyes forward, hands tight on the wheel. I kept glancing at the fuel gauge. It hadn't moved in over an hour. That made no sense. We had been climbing hills, taking sharp turns. We should have burned through at least a quarter tank. But the needle stayed where it was, and then, like someone snapped their fingers, The light vanished. No sunset. No blue hour. 1 second we were driving through fading daylight, and the next it was pitch black. The headlights lit only a few feet of the road ahead, and everything outside that cone of light was swallowed by dark. The trees were gone. The road looked thinner. Then I noticed the odometer ticking backwards. Not fast, just steadily counting down, 1 mile at a time, like we were undoing the trip. Darren saw it too. He didn't say anything, but his foot eased off the gas. His grip on the wheel tightened. His jaw was clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grinding. That's when we saw him. A man, standing on the right side of the road, facing away, looking into the woods, not moving. He wore old-fashioned clothes, wool pants, suspenders, a pale shirt with tiny buttons that shimmered in the headlights. We passed him in silence. A mile later, he was there again. Same spot, same posture. I stared straight ahead. Darren whispered, barely audible, "Don't look at him." I didn't want to, but when we passed him a third time, my eyes flicked to the side mirror. Just a quick glance. His head had turned. Not all the way, just enough for me to know he was watching us leave. I didn't say anything. I just turned my eyes back to the road. We kept going. The odometer kept ticking down. The inside of the truck got hot, like something was pressing against the windows, trying to crush us from the outside. I started to sweat, but my hands were ice cold. Time felt slippery. I checked my phone, still stuck on 4:30. The numbers hadn't changed in what felt like forever. Then we reached a fork in the road. No signs, no lights, just two paths, one gravel, one paved. Darren didn't ask. He didn't hesitate. He just took the paved one. Everything shifted. The air lightened. The odometer stopped, paused, then started counting forward again. The fuel gauge dropped a little. I didn't realize how loud I'd been breathing until I finally exhaled and it fogged up the window. 10 minutes later, we saw headlights in the distance, then houses, then streetlights, people walking on sidewalks, a dog barking, a gas station sign glowing in the dark. We were back, somehow. We pulled into a mechanic's lot at the edge of town and just sat there. We didn't speak. We just stared out the windshield like we were waiting to wake up. Eventually, Darren went inside, talked to the guy behind the counter. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "You know if there are any old roads that run through the mountains west of here?" The mechanic set down his wrench, looked at us for a long moment, and said flatly, "Not for 40 years. County shut them down. Too many accidents. Folks kept disappearing. That was it. No follow-up, no questions. Just that." We didn't argue. We slept in the truck that night, parked under the lights at a 24-hour diner. Neither of us wanted to get back on the road until the sun came up. We never talked much about what happened. I'd taken a week off and didn't really tell anyone where I was going. Just threw a bunch of clothes in a duffel, loaded a cooler with some halfway decent snacks, and pointed my rust-colored Outback toward the mountains. I didn't book a cabin, didn't plot a route, didn't check the weather. The whole point was not to plan. I wanted to drive until things felt different. Less fluorescent lights, fewer clock-ins, more trees, more road hum, and solitude. I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't heartbroken or burned out in some dramatic way. It was more like I'd been slowly sanded down by routine. My body was showing up to work, but my brain had checked out sometime in April. I figured the Appalachians were as good a place as any to go quiet for a while. Just me, some old maps, and miles of two-lane roads. By the second morning, I'd already forgotten what day it was. That felt like progress. I woke up parked on the edge of a clearing near Oak Marsh, brushed my teeth next to the car, ate breakfast out of the cooler while watching a squirrel try to carry off an entire granola bar wrapper. No cell signal, no emails. It felt like my brain had unclenched. That afternoon, after passing a town called Elridge, if you could even call it a town, I ended up in one of those dead zones. The kind of stretch where even the cows looked like they hadn't seen a car in weeks. I was following a road that wound lazily through the foothills, letting the GPS nap since it wasn't doing me much good anyway. Around 4, I noticed the gas gauge dipping lower than I liked. Just as I was about to turn around and backtrack, I spotted a crooked sign on the side of the road. Faded lettering, almost white from sun damage. It just said ours. That was it, no other details. Still, the place looked functional. A sad little gas station with 2 pumps and a shop that looked like it sold more dust than snacks. The windows were cloudy. The door had a bell that jangled weakly when I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with that dry, plasticky scent that places get when no one moves anything for too long. The guy behind the counter looked like he might have come with the building. He had a stooped posture, a heavy flannel shirt even though it wasn't cold, and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. One of his eyes didn't quite follow the other, giving him this vaguely lopsided look, like he was always half watching something over your shoulder. I grabbed a bottle of water and a cup of coffee that tasted like hot cardboard. As I paid, I figured I'd try my luck. "Hey, you know if there are any good scenic spots around here? I'm kind of just driving, looking for places to stop and wander." He didn't answer right away, just stared out the smudged window behind me for a few long seconds. Then he said, "Fire Ridge Road. Go past marker 16. There's a pull-off. Got a view you won't forget." That was all. No recommendation, no smile, just that one line, like he was reading from a script someone else had written for him. Still, I nodded, said thanks, and left. The directions were vague, but Fire Ridge Road wasn't hard to find. It was marked by a narrow wooden post hammered into the ground at a slant. Peeling paint, half hidden by weeds. But it was there. Real enough. At first, the road was paved, sort of. The asphalt had more cracks than not. I had to dodge a couple of deep divots that could have eaten a tire. Trees pressed in tight from both sides, like the forest was trying to reclaim the road but hadn't finished the job yet. About a mile in, the pavement gave up completely, replaced by gravel and dust. The road narrowed, winding through dips and sudden curves. No signs, no fences, no houses. Just trees and quiet. Not peaceful quiet, thick quiet, like the sound had been vacuumed out of the space. Even with the windows cracked, I couldn't hear wind. No birds, no crickets. Still, I kept going. By the time I passed the marker for mile 12, I hadn't seen another soul in at least 45 minutes. My hands were loose on the wheel, but my back was starting to tense. There's something weird about being that alone. Not scary, not yet, just hyper-aware, like your body notices before your brain does. I spotted the mile 16 marker right after a sharp bend. It was splintered and leaning hard to one side. Looked like it had been hit, or maybe just slowly rotted where it stood. About 200 yards past it, there was a break in the trees. A turnout cut into the side of the road, big enough for maybe 2 cars if you squeezed. I pulled in and parked at the edge, expecting a panoramic postcard view. What I got was not that. There were hills, yes, bluish layers folding into one another, and a narrow ribbon of road threading between them, but something was wrong. Like the depth was missing. If I stared too long, the edges shimmered. The colors didn't match what I knew the world looked like. It reminded me of those early computer game backgrounds where things only looked real if you didn't look too closely, and it was dead silent. Not even the faint ticking of the engine cooling. I stepped out of the car, letting the gravel crunch under my boots, and stood there for a minute. That's when I noticed the trail, not marked. Just a narrow path leading into the trees from the far side of the turnout. Barely visible unless you were looking for it. The kind of trail you'd assume was just a deer path if you weren't paying attention. But it was there, worn but not worn out. So, like an idiot with no self-preservation instincts, I followed it. It went straight for a while, no curve, no fork, just soft dirt underfoot, scattered pine needles, and trees pressing in close. About 100 yards in, I came across a wooden post stuck at an angle. Something had once been nailed to it, maybe a sign, but only rusted nails and splintered corners remained. No footprints, no trash, no broken branches. I turned around. The trail was empty, same way I'd come, but the quiet felt closer now. Like whatever air had been moving had stopped. I stepped back into the turnout. My car was gone. Not moved. Gone. The gravel was still disturbed where the tires had been, but there was no vehicle, no engine sound, no taillights, just an empty patch of road and a gut-deep confusion I couldn't shake. I stood there a long minute, staring at the spot like the car might blink back if I waited. Then I pulled out my phone. It was off. No bars, not searching, just dead. Cold to the touch. I pressed the power button again. And again, nothing. Nothing. That's when I started walking, back the way I'd come. No idea how far the main road was, or if there even was one. Just me, my boots, and a road that suddenly didn't feel like it had any exits. 10 minutes in, I passed a tree with a shallow mark in the bark, a single slash. I hadn't noticed it before. I picked up my pace. 5 minutes later, another mark, deeper, fresher, bark curling back. I stopped, turned in a slow circle. The woods didn't move, but the air felt thicker, like I was being watched, just out of sight. I started walking faster. The third mark was an X, carved deep, still damp around the edges. The shadows had changed. The sun hadn't set, but the light had turned wrong. Stretched, tilted. That's when I broke into a run. Around the next curve, tucked between the trees, I saw light. Not bright. Just a soft glow in the windows of a small cabin. The kind of glow that said someone's home, even though nothing else about it felt welcoming. I ran straight to the porch and knocked. Twice, then pounded. No answer. I tried the handle. It opened. Inside was one room. Empty mostly. Wooden floor, bare walls. A single chair turned toward the corner like someone had been sitting in timeout and never got up. In the middle of the floor, bare footprints. Wet. One set. Standing still, then turning away. They didn't lead to the door. I backed out slowly. Shut the door without turning around. The turnout was visible from there, and the car was back, same spot, like it had never moved. But the view was gone. No hills, no valley, just trees. The forest pressing up against the bumper. I didn't hesitate. Ran to the car, yanked the door open, and slid inside. My duffel was still in the back. The engine started on the first try. Everything was the same. Except the rearview mirror was tilted all the way up. I reached for it. Adjusted it. For a split second, something looked back. Tall, wrong, folded into the shadows of the backseat. Just watching. Then nothing. I didn't adjust it again. I didn't look back. I drove straight, hands tight on the wheel, until the trees thinned and Route 22 reappeared. It was a Thursday night, somewhere between boredom and the end of a long week, when Tyler called. He said he had a favor to ask, one of those real quick things that usually isn't. He needed to haul some boxes to his cousin's place, way out past the main roads. Just junk he promised to drop off. Old clothes, maybe some tools, a few crates of who knows what shoved in the back of his truck. Nothing urgent. But he didn't want to drive alone, and I didn't really have an excuse not to tag along. Honestly, I thought the weirdest part of the night would be how late it was. We were heading out close to 10, and I figured the only real threats were deer and maybe Tyler falling asleep at the wheel. I brought a hoodie and a half-dead phone. That's how casual I was about it. We hit the interstate, cruising past empty rest stops and long, dark stretches of nothing. Just the two of us and a whole lot of asphalt. The kind of silence that settles in once you've run out of small talk but aren't ready to sleep yet. Tyler fiddled with the radio, trying to find something that wasn't fuzzy AM sports talk. I think we landed on some classic rock station, barely coming in, but better than nothing. At first, it was peaceful. The road rolled out in front of us like a black ribbon, and the occasional headlights from oncoming traffic gave the night just enough reality to make it feel safe. But the deeper we drove, the more it all thinned out. Fewer signs, fewer lights, fewer signs of anything living at all. Eventually, the wide lane shrank to 2, and the shoulder all but disappeared. No street lights, no traffic, not even fence posts. It felt like we'd slipped out of the normal map. That's when the GPS started freaking out. Tyler had it clipped to his dash, the voice calm at first. "In 1 mile, turn right," it said. Then it froze. The screen glitched for a second, flickered, and suddenly the voice came back, sounding confused. Recalculating. It did that a few times. We both laughed the first time, like it was some little hiccup in the system. Tyler gave it a tap. "Probably lost signal. These hills hate cell towers," he muttered, but then it happened again. Then again. Each reroute sent us down tighter, twistier roads. I watched the screen, and the road names just disappeared. No more Old Creek Drive or Route 7. Just squiggly gray lines wrapped around each other like tangled shoelaces. After a while, Tyler stopped joking. The road pitched upward, winding into switchbacks so tight it felt like we were turning in place. Guardrails were warped and bent, some of them pushed inward like they'd been hit from the outside, which made no sense. Every time I thought we had to be climbing out of the hills, the next bend would just throw us deeper in, and then we passed it. The first thing that made my skin crawl, a wooden sign nailed to a leaning post on the right side of the road, faded so badly you couldn't read what it once said. But someone had spray painted a black arrow across it, pointing down the next turnoff. We hesitated, but we took the turn. Didn't really have a choice. The GPS kept mumbling at us like it was guessing. 10 minutes later, that same sign showed up again. I mean, exactly the same. Same splintered edge, same knot in the wood, same crooked nail holding it up. That dumb black arrow still pointed right. I leaned forward, squinting. "Did we pass that already?" "I didn't turn us around," Tyler said, quick and firm, like he'd been asking himself the same thing for the last mile. From that point on, it stopped being funny. That low-level unease turned into something colder, heavier. Like the road itself didn't want us there. The trees on either side leaned in, closer than before. Some tilted at strange angles, like they'd grown toward the road deliberately. Then we saw the lights. At the bottom of a hill, just beyond a bend, a soft fluorescent glow lit up the dark. A gas station. The kind of glow that feels like safety when you've been out in the middle of nowhere for too long. Tyler let out this little breath, half laugh, half relief, and pulled toward it without even asking. But even from a distance, something was off. The building looked freshly painted, almost brand new, but the gas pumps were wrong. They had no hoses, just empty metal frames with jagged holes where the nozzles should have been, like someone had ripped them out. The windows had posters taped up, sun-faded ones advertising gas for 89 cents. I remember that number because I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. And the inside? Empty, not closed for the night. Empty, just bare. No counter, no shelves, no fridge humming in the corner, nothing. The lights were on, bright and sterile, illuminating absolutely nothing. Tyler didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. We drove past it like we were afraid looking too long would make it real. I turned around in my seat. The lights were still glowing, but the station looked smaller than it should have, shrinking into the distance too fast. Neither of us said a word for a while. We just kept driving. I stared at the trees, trying not to think about how they looked closer now. Taller, like the road was narrowing even more, swallowing us. Then we saw them. Two red tail lights ahead, weaving slowly through the trees. Tyler sat up straighter. Finally, someone else out here. He sped up just a bit, enough to try and catch them, but not enough to look desperate. He kept his eyes locked forward, hands firm on the wheel. But no matter how fast we went, we didn't gain anything. The lights stayed the same distance ahead. Sometimes they dipped around a bend, disappeared for a second, and came right back, farther than they should have been. Then it hit me. There were no headlights. No glow spilling onto the pavement. No red reflecting off the trees. The lights were just floating in the dark, like they weren't attached to anything at all. I told Tyler to slow down, to back off. But he was zoned out, mumbling under his breath, knuckles white on the wheel. He leaned forward like he was hypnotized. I could feel it in my chest. That sick, sinking feeling you get when you know something's wrong and no one's doing anything about it. So I grabbed the wheel and pulled. Hard. The truck swerved, tires skidding across the gravel shoulder. Tyler snapped out of it, cursing, slamming the brakes. We came to a stop sideways on the road, engine idling, everything shaking. The taillights were gone. We sat there in silence, trying to catch our breath. Then Tyler glanced at the mirror. "They're behind us," he whispered. I turned slowly. There they were. Two red dots, perfectly still at the last curve we'd come around. No movement. No engine sound. Just sitting there, waiting. Tyler didn't even think. He jammed the truck into gear and floored it down the nearest side road. We tore through branches, the truck bouncing over potholes. Every turn felt more desperate than the last. He didn't care where we were going, he just wanted to get away. I don't know how long we drove like that. 10 minutes, an hour. The GPS was still dead. Then, out of nowhere, the screen lit up. A little blue line reappeared, and there it was, the highway. Just a few miles away. Tyler didn't say a word. He just followed it. We flew through the last stretch of woods, the trees finally thinning out, the air opening up, and just like that, we broke out of it. When we pulled into his cousin's gravel driveway, Tyler cut the engine and gripped the steering wheel like it was anchoring him to the world. I could see the veins in his forearms twitching. I didn't say anything, neither did he. But just before the GPS came back on, when we made that last turn out of the trees, I glanced in the side mirror. The red lights were there, right at the edge of the forest, still unmoving. They didn't follow us onto the open road, they just stopped, like they'd brought us as far as they were allowed to go. I was 21 when I thought I finally understood what freedom felt like. That summer, Cam borrowed his uncle's old camper van, a big, clunky thing that looked like it had been parked under a tree since the late 90s. The paint was a fading, swampy green with patches of rust spreading across it. One of the back windows had a garbage bag taped over it. But we didn't care. Inside, it was surprisingly livable. 2 benches folded into beds, a tiny stove, a cooler, and just enough floor space to stretch out if you didn't mind sleeping like a pretzel. It was enough. We didn't need motels, or maps, or a plan. It meant we could just drive, wherever we wanted, whenever we felt like it. Our third friend, Leo, had just finished his last semester. None of us had jobs lined up yet. We figured this was the perfect window. A few weeks where no one expected anything from us. No responsibilities, no schedules, just freedom, the real kind. The kind that feels like a blank page. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Head toward the Appalachians and figure it out as we went. We'd follow the blue highways, those thin lines on the map that snake between small towns and get you lost in the best ways. No interstates, no chains. Just old diners, gas stations with creaky screen doors, and roads twisting through endless pine. The first few days felt like a movie. We'd point to names we couldn't pronounce and drive until we found them. Ate gas station jerky for lunch and $3 burgers at places called the Skillet or Mom's Grill. We stopped at scenic overlooks, climbed onto the roof of the van, and watched the sun dip behind the trees while mosquitoes made a buffet out of our legs. Nights were a mix of half-sleep and cheap beer. We park in quiet spots behind abandoned buildings, next to rivers, and gravel pull-offs, and crash in a pile of limbs and sleeping bags. Sometimes it was too hot, sometimes it was freezing, but we didn't care. Every morning we woke up groggy, sore, and completely thrilled. But the deeper we got into the mountains, the more things started to feel off. Nothing dramatic, just little things. Towns that didn't show up on the GPS. Signs pointing two directions for the same destination. Roads freshly paved that turned to gravel without warning. One morning we stopped at a diner where no one spoke to us. Not even the waitress. She took our order without looking up, dropped the plates on the table, walked away like we'd ruined her night. We joked about it at first, called it Appalachian energy. But the deeper we went, the less funny it felt. There was one road, I swear to this day, that we climbed uphill, engine grinding the whole way. But outside the window, the trees leaned downhill. Like gravity didn't work the same out there. On the fourth night, we camped by a stream. The day had been perfect. Clear water, flat rocks to lie on, just enough shade to keep from roasting. We drank too much, stayed out too long, and packed up close to 10. That's when Cam said we should find a hot spring he'd heard about. A local guy at a gas station told him it was hidden in the hills. Totally free, barely marked, usually empty after dark. It sounded amazing at the time, the kind of hidden gem this whole trip was about. Leo was half asleep, but Cam was wired from too much coffee, so we figured, why not? We set off up a narrow 2-lane road that twisted immediately. No signs, no lights, just the GPS insisting it was a straight line while we wound turn after turn. A few miles later, even the GPS gave up. Just blinked out. Cam laughed and said it had finally realized we had no idea what we were doing. But I wasn't laughing anymore. The trees pressed in tight, leaning over the road. The pavement crumbled at the edges. No reflectors, no shoulder. It felt like we were inching our way up the spine of something ancient that didn't want us there. Then, in one ordinary bend of the road, the headlights swept forward and caught them. A woman and a little boy, walking directly in the center of the road. Cam shouted and yanked the wheel. The tires screamed, and for a moment I thought we were going over the edge. The van fishtailed, then caught itself. The headlights froze them in place, and that moment is burned into my brain. She looked completely normal, like someone you'd see at the grocery store. Middle-aged, brown hair pulled back, cardigan hanging loose. No expression on her face, just blank. Like she was lost in thought. She wasn't holding the boy's hand. She was gripping his wrist. He was tiny, maybe 3 years old, wearing fuzzy blue footy pajamas with a bear stitched on the front. His eyes were wide, but he didn't cry or speak. He didn't even seem scared. They both just kept walking. They didn't glance at the van, didn't pause, just stepped past us and disappeared into the dark. I turned to look, but the curve swallowed them. Cam let out the breath he'd been holding. What the hell was that? Who brings a kid out here at night? That's when it hit us. There hadn't been a house for miles. No driveway, no porch lights, no cars, just trees. Neither of us said anything after that. 15 minutes later, we reached the hot spring. It was supposed to be empty, peaceful, secluded. Instead, the gravel lot was lit up by headlights. A group of people moved around in panic. Flashlights cut through the trees. Voices shouted a name again and again. We stepped out, confused, and immediately a woman ran toward us. "Have you seen a little boy? Please, he's wearing blue pajamas." Her voice cracked. Cam and I looked at each other. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to say it. I ran to the van, yanked the dash cam off the windshield, rewound the feed, found the frame, froze it. I turned the screen so she could see, and she collapsed. "That's him," she whispered. "That's my son." She begged us to take her there. Her husband jumped in beside her, face tight, eyes unblinking. Leo sat up in the back, groggy and confused. But we didn't have time to explain. A line of cars followed as we drove back. The road looked even more surreal the second time. Every bend looked the same. Every tree a copy of the last. Just when I started to doubt we'd ever find it, the headlights caught something small near the guardrail. The boy. He was sitting on the edge of the road, hugging his knees to his chest, not crying, just waiting. Cam slammed the brakes. His parents leapt out before we stopped moving, ran to him, fell on their knees, scooped him up. He was shaking, but he was okay. He told them the woman had taken his hand, walked him up the road, told him to sit by the rail and wait, said she'd come back soon. Then she stepped into the woods and vanished, just like that. We all stood there a long time, silent, listening to the wind in the trees and the murmur of voices behind us. Then the cops arrived, took our statements, copied the dashcam footage, said they'd search the woods and keep us updated. They didn't. Weeks went by. No suspects, no follow-up, no missing persons matching her description. Nothing. They mailed the memory card back in a plain envelope. No note. But the footage never left my head. There's one frame, right before they vanish around the bend. Just a flicker. Her head turned slightly toward the van, toward the camera, and she's smiling.